Hi folks, Mike Weisar here, CEO of Lean Integrated. I've been getting a lot of inquiry lately regarding respect for people in Lean, and it began with a gentleman in the construction industry sending me a list of items that he had received from one of his coaches describing respect for people, and I read that list and it was a very good list. However, I also noticed that it was very westernized. In other words, it's things to the effect of what personality quadrant does this person fit into? Are they an A-type personality, a D-type personality? And it went down a list of things that you can do that are very good, common sense ways of treating other human beings, whether you're a leader or not. And things like, do you praise people when they do things right? Do you forgive them when they do small things wrong and help them get to the root cause of how that mistake happened and help them fix it? And things to that effect. And it's all very good stuff. It's not the experience I had early on in the Lean process back in the 1980s. And so I wanted to share that today, just so you guys had the review of that experience. I just had a really unique experience, and that's what I want to share. So I worked back at a company called Genie Industries. They're a lifting equipment company similar to the automotive industry. And back in the 1980s, we knew the Japanese were really excelling as far as productivity, efficiency, and quality. And we just really had no idea why. We tried for a couple of years to figure out what that was, but there are no books, no videos. There was no way to get that information until one day we had a guy from Honda come in as our leader, and I reported directly to him. And he helped me understand respect for people from a particular angle, and that's what I'd like to cover now. So first of all, we were in an organization that was really struggling, and you know how it gets in that kind of organization. People start blaming each other for problems, and you know, he's smart and he's not, and things to that effect, right? And people really start working against each other. It's because the culture and morale are very low in that organization. So when he got there, he would focus on the processes. And I'll never forget walking out to the factory floor, and he's looking at a big spindle, and he said, "Hey, Mike, you know, this spindle, the bearing doesn't fit on it quite right, and the guys here on the floor are telling me it's a real problem when they're trying to assemble these units." And I said, you know, yeah, that's because that head of engineering, he's not a very smart guy and not very capable and things to that effect, right? I was going down that same path that anybody else was going down in our organization at that time. And what he did is he just very politely said, "Oh, okay. Anyway, so what do you think, though? I mean, do you think we should get a mic? Let's mic the spindle or see if or is it the bearing that's the problem? Maybe there's a couple of guys here we should bring over and have them describe for us what the problem is, right?" And so what happened was he did that with everyone. He did that with everyone in engineering. He did that with everyone on the factory floor, whether they were manufacturing or assembly. And what happened is the conversation in the organization changed. Every time we were having a conversation with him, it was on the process. And we started to realize that he's always going to be polite if we're complaining about something in the company or complaining about another person. And he'll always say, "Oh, okay. But anyway, but what do you think now? How do you think we should address it?" And he just kept bringing us back around to that. And what happened was, we would start solving problems together. I'd be talking with somebody else, or three other people would be talking together, and the next thing you know, we were solving problems. And it doesn't take very long solving problems together. You build a real camaraderie, a sense of teamwork, right? And then he took that another step further. He had the engineers, so the professional people, the respect that you get crossing those boundaries, those borders. He would have them come out to the floor, the engineers, with their new designs, and talk to the people who are going to run the drill presses and run the welding machines and the big lathes, and say, "Hey, this is my design, this is what I'm thinking. What do you think? Is it going to be easy to manufacture? Can we do it this way? Will that equipment work like this? Do you think the design's good?" And what happened is they started to build a rapport between the people in engineering, because what the engineers learned was not only are you going to get good answers regarding design and things to that effect, you're going to get all kinds of creative problem solving. "Hey, Mark, that's a good idea, but have you thought about solving that one like this?" Have him step back and say, "Oh, no, I hadn't thought about that yet." So suddenly the respect between those two groups started to grow. And then management respect was another one. we had to learn that our role as a manager was to serve the people on the floor. And that's one thing to say it, right? I know there's other mantras that use that same line of thought, but the fact is, if you are out with the people on the floor every day, finding what's slowing down, bogging down their work, making it difficult, making quality hard to hold, then you can begin to help them solve those problems. And suddenly the respect between the people out on the factory floor, in this case in the hospital, is beginning to build, right? Because that's what management's real role is to help work run more smoothly, to help get rid of the waste and increased efficiency and effectiveness. So really what he was doing is he was taking us from who to what, from who to the process. And what happened was when we just kept focusing on the process, pretty soon our thinking turned. And what I realized later is it only took about 60 to 90 days for that entire culture to change. And that's still my experience, because in today's world, as I go work with new clients, we start from the beginning often. And it's still, you have to go through that process. Now understand, this is really just philosophy and methodology, right? There's no tools here that we're talking about. This is just the way that he approached things. So that's great for small things like a bearing going on a spindle and really small issues. But of course, as we know in healthcare, you often have much more complex issues, problems to solve. And you have to talk about the process that we use to discover the best solutions for those issues, because that supports the mantra that the lean process is respect for people. Now let me describe that for a second. So we're going to go out and collect data on a specific issue. So we go out, we literally walk with the patient or with the physician, and we go step by step through that process, and we have some paperwork that we're going to fill out. We're going to monitor that process and really get good data. Okay? Once we've got enough data, usually takes 2 or 3 days, once we've got enough data that we really have our arms around the situation and we all step back as a group, say we're a team of 8 or 10 people, we step back as a group and we say, okay, we all clearly understand what the issue is. Now, if you haven't got to that point, you're not done collecting data. If there's one person that's a holdout, they may need to go collect some more data before they're convinced that this really is our position at the moment. But once you do that, you've created some teamwork. There's more respect that's been built. Everybody agrees on where we're starting from and what the real problem is, all right? And then you can move on to creative problem solving. So as you go into creative solutions and you start getting in small groups and you're figuring out what you think would be a good response to the data, to the issue you just found, then you go out and you try it, right? Plan, do, check, act. So you go out and you try it, you learn what worked, you learn what didn't work, you come back, you think about what you're going to change, and then those small teams, they all report out to each other. So regardless what anyone's personality is, everyone has 3 minutes to do their report out, to do their presentation, and to sell what they think their solution may be. Everyone. So the people who really, monopolize time and spend way too much time talking, they have 3 minutes. And the people who don't talk as much and don't jump up, to volunteer information, they have 3 minutes. And the thing is that they have to explain their position from, this is the data we had, this is why we thought our solution would resolve that data issue, this is what we tried, this is what the results were, this is what we think we learned and what we're going to adjust and do next, right? So they have to say all those things. So even people who don't inherently talk a lot still have to give their 3 minutes, right? They have to cover all of that. So the process starts bringing everybody together in a fashion where they are working from what they know the issue is, they're coming up with solutions, they're testing those solutions, they go back and try again, test again, until they finally come up with a standard solution, standard work. And this is the process that they're going to move forward with. And now the whole team has put that together through these iterations of solutions, right? So they whittle it down and they have this one final solution. That's their standard work. Now, if people are going to follow standard work, and that's always the toughest part of any change process, right, is to sustain the improvements that you made. If they're going to do that, it needs to be their improvements, right? it just is common sense to understand that people who came up with that solution, went through this entire process, are going to want to standardize, they're going to want to sustain that work. And no matter what solution we came up with in the beginning, we always have to remember that Kaizen is continuous incremental improvement. It will change. And over a few months, the process may change significantly. But that is an excellent starting point with an entire team together. Now, if people go through that process where every single step includes you, every single step you have a say, you have a vote, then the camaraderie builds again, that respect builds again. And when you get in small teams and you go out and you're really trying things out, now people that you've worked next to most of your life but may not even know their name have become somebody you sort of become embattled with, right? You know, you're out there, you're in the trenches, you're trying to figure something out, you're trying to zero in and really come up with the best process. Of course, you're going to build camaraderie and respect in that process. Okay, so that's why we say the lean process is respect for people. But let's take that into healthcare specifically. So for healthcare, we often have to take a deep breath and say, look, we can do a couple of things this year. Oftentimes we have way too many initiatives and not really enough manpower under each initiative to get good traction. But if we pick just 2 items this year to really go after and focus our efforts in earnest, then we can have some real bottom line impact. So let's say that we selected the surgical process and the ER process. All right, so now we have 2 value streams that we know we're going to go out and try to have some significant effect on this year. So we go out and we collect our data. We get our value stream data. So we get in our small teams and we actually follow the patients all the way through the surgical process, starting right from their phone call until they're back home and they're healed, right? All those steps. We figure out what they are, we follow them, we discover what the patient goes through, what the providers go through, all of that. And we do the same thing with the ER. All right, so that's value stream mapping. Then we do our RPRWs, our Rapid Process Improvement Workshops. So now we get in those small teams again and we go after pieces. If I know that value stream, I know every component of it and how long each thing takes, then I can take a look at it in detail with my RPIWs in a small team and we can go after a piece of that value stream and really have significant effect in terms of quality, cost, delivery, safety, morale, and profit. So as we do that and we keep going after various parts of that value stream, the timeline reduces, the quality goes up, fewer and fewer medical errors, less and less harm to patients, right? So you're starting to have these big impacts. Now, when people go through that together, there's just no way that you don't get a sense of camaraderie, that respect for each other, as long as they're following these processes as they apply these tools. Then suddenly we're building more and more respect for each other. Now we can start diving into some of the more complex parts of lean, the 5S, Kanban, setup reduction, multidisciplinary bedside rounding, training within the industry, and on, all the other lean tools. And as we apply each one of them, as long as we follow these methodologies and philosophies, and as long as we apply process thinking, the lean process, and then we use those to approach it from a healthcare point of view. How is lean properly deployed in the healthcare system? Then you're going to have a significant effect on respect for people. Now I'll say again, that doesn't take away these attributes that people talk about, right? You still have to be a good person. You have to be a good leader who knows how to bring out the best in your people. All those things are still going to be important. However, in the lean process, we seldom talk about those things. The respect for people that you see in the Japanese organizations is from applying the process in this method. Okay? I hope that helps everybody, and I can't wait to hear your feedback. All the best to you in 2023.